putting themselves in your shoes, basing their determination of what you knew about the law at the time. And so it's important to understand that what is considered reasonable doesn't necessarily mean that it's reasonable for every person in every situation. The other thing that I want to mention is that you have to think about it from the perspective of who is actually on the jury. And if you think about that from a baseline perspective, all it takes to be a juror, at least in California, is to essentially either have a driver's license or be registered to vote. And so think about that from the perspective of who you're going to be being judged by. Is effectively 12 complete strangers that have a driver's license. How hard is it to get a driver's license in the state of California? Not very hard. So when you are looking at or asking yourself what is appropriate under the circumstances, or like, let's say you were to ask me, what if I did this or what if I did that? I'm not going to be able to tell you with 100% certainty, because really who you're going to be ultimately be judged by is 12 complete strangers that are licensed drivers or registered to vote. And so the response that I usually like to give to people that ask me these types of questions is, well, think about it from this perspective. If you cannot convince 12 complete strangers that your actions are reasonable, or you have a doubt that you would be able to convince those people, I would suggest that you rethink your actions at that point. So we can talk about specifics, and I'm going to open it up to the floor now to questions that you guys might have, or if you have hypotheticals or whatnot that we can go through. But I think that's going to be, you'll see that sort of theme in my responses to a lot of this stuff, is that that's really the only way to come to any sort of, I should say, reasonable conclusion on whether or not your actions would be justified in a particular situation. So with that, Steve, if you want, I'll open it up to questions from the audience.
Please. Could you address that incident that happened in St. Louis with that couple? What they did wrong, what they should have done better, or something?
Yeah. So what Steve's
about this, so.
Yeah. So what Steve's referencing is I'm sure most of you might have seen the couple, and I believe it was St. Louis, Missouri, that there was a large protest that had gathered outside their property. They had broken down a gate to their property and had come on to their, essentially within a couple yards of their house. And the couple came outside. They had armed themselves, the individual, the man with the AR-15, as well as the wife. I believe she had a small pistol. And so now what's happened is, my understanding of recent developments in the case is that the district attorney has executed a warrant on them to seize the firearms that they displayed during the incident. And I believe what they've done that for is for the purposes of holding those firearms as evidence, because they're considering filing criminal charges against them. Now, my understanding is they haven't filed any charges against them yet. But if I were to put myself in the shoes of a district attorney, looking at what I've seen as far as the videos of the incident and what's been out in the media, granted, I can't come to any sort of definitive conclusion one way or another, but just based off of what I've seen, I think there's a possibility there that the prosecutor would potentially file charges, for example, things like brandishing the firearm at the individuals. If you're going to brandish a firearm, you technically should be able to meet all of the elements of self-defense as if you would almost be pulling the trigger. And so it's important to understand that, especially here in California, this is another thing to consider, that this happened in St. Louis, Missouri. We're in California. That brandishing a firearm should really be the last possible act that you can do before ultimately having to discharge your weapon in self-defense. And there's some good reasons for that, because think about it from the perspective of, let's say, a law enforcement officer, someone brandishes a firearm against them, they're going to treat that as the potential use of deadly force. And so when you're brandishing a firearm, you're almost going to have to justify your brandishing a firearm as if it was actually using deadly force in that situation. And so there's some questions there as far as, in that particular situation in St. Louis, Missouri, whether or not the brandishing of those firearms at the protesters that were present was sort of absolutely necessary, the last step, that they could have taken before actually pulling the trigger. And so that's, I think, the potential issues that they might have. But even then, they've still got a very, very, very good claim for self-defense, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with that case, especially now that I've been hearing rumors that the president of the United States has taken notice, and they're looking at potentially, finding ways of supporting them how they can. But it's too early to tell, and frankly, what we all get this sort of snapshot of what happened in the media, but that's not always the best way to look at a case like this, because oftentimes, especially as many of you I'm sure know, the media will portray things that, quite frankly, in one way, but then when you look at all of the evidence that ultimately comes to light during the trial or any subsequent criminal case, it's a completely different story. And so based off of what I've seen, there's some potential issues there, but like I'm saying, from everything that I've seen, there's also some very good potential claims of self-defense in that situation.
A question, what about, and about, you hear this, that you have to feel that your life is in danger, not just you want to defend, but you actually have to feel that someone's going to kill you, basically, before you can actually do something.
Yeah, so that's actually one of the elements that I was talking about under California law. In order to use deadly force in self-defense, one of the elements is that you must reasonably believe that you are in imminent danger of being killed or suffering great bodily injury. And so again, how that's going to be determined is the jury is going to place themselves in your shoes based off of what you knew at the time, and then ask what a reasonable person in a similar situation with similar knowledge would do in that particular situation. And so that's how the jury is going to determine that. But yes, that is one of the required elements that, generally speaking, you must reasonably believe that you were about to suffer death or great bodily injury before you can use deadly force in self-defense, at least under California law.
Because as far as myself, I'm sure other older people, I've been alive through the Watts riots, and also the riots like in '92, where you see the picture of the man being dragged out of his truck and beaten almost to death. I mean,
yep.
So what if you are at your house and there is like a riot area and people are approaching your property and they're about to get on your property, and you tell them back off, I'll shoot, and they keep like assaulting you, going forward and forward. At what point are you justified in shooting? Should you run back in your house and let the crowd destroy your house? Or you hear about the castle doctrine. How does that apply in California?
Yeah, so you touched on a lot of things there. So interestingly enough, California does not have a duty to retreat before using deadly force in self-defense. It is not, in a sense, it is not a required elements before one can use deadly force in self-defense. But you still have to meet specific requirements before you can actually use deadly force. Obviously, one of them being that you have to demonstrate that you believe that you are in imminent danger of suffering death or great bodily injury, but also that specifically now I'm talking about all the elements, that the immediate use of deadly force was necessary to defend against that danger, but also that you use no more force than was reasonably necessary. And all of those elements are, again, they're determined by this reasonableness standard that the jury uses to determine whether or not someone acted in self-defense and whether or not those actions were appropriate. And so it's very difficult, like I was saying, to answer that sort of these types of what if questions. But so the answer that I typically give, like I said, is that, if you were in a situation, do you think in that particular situation that you would have any difficulty convincing 12 strangers that your actions were justified? And if there's any doubt in your mind, I encourage you at that point to rethink your actions.
Well, here's something else that comes up quite often, of course, because of the movies. Well, how come you just didn't shoot the gun out of his hand? It's in the movies. It happens all the time, and you didn't, and you killed this person where you could have just shot him in the foot.
Yep. And so that raises another interesting aspect if you think about it logically, and it's sometimes it's convoluted, but once you start to think about it from a logical perspective, it does make a little bit more sense. But so let's take the example of, well, why didn't you shoot them in the hand or shoot their gun out or in the leg or try and wound them? Whenever you're discharging a firearm in self-defense, you're doing so because deadly force is necessary at that point. And so it's not It's not something that, like what the former vice president now running for president said, that, you fire 2 shotgun shells into the air and all things are hunky-dory. That's not how it works, because in California, there have been documented instances of, for example, individuals being prosecuted for negligently discharging a firearm because the prosecutor at the point believed that they couldn't satisfy the required elements of self-defense, namely that the discharge of that gun at that particular time was not necessary to stop an immediate, imminent danger of of being killed or suffering great bodily injury. Because if you have the time and the wherewithal to determine that you can shoot someone in the leg or fire a warning shot or whatnot, deadly force is not immediately necessary at that point. And so that's the problem that creates when, for example, firing a warning shot. And that's something, despite what the former vice president and now presidential candidate said, don't do that in California.
Okay, can you address some of the chat? I don't know how you read the chat, but
yeah, so I got it up. So
oh,
what's the burden of proof for use of a firearm in self-defense? Is it preponderance of the evidence, clear and convincing, or beyond a reasonable doubt? So as I was saying, the prosecutor bears the burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed a crime. But what's happening when you claim self-defense is that you're essentially justifying your actions. And so you now bear the burden to justify that your actions were, in fact, appropriate under the circumstances. And so that shifts the burden to you to prove that. Now, there's another element that we haven't talked about yet in California, which is what's called the Castle Doctrine. And what the Castle Doctrine is that creates this sort of presumption under the law that you acted in self-defense if you did so in your own home. Now, of course, what constitutes your own home is not entirely clear, and obviously it's going to depend on every particular person's home in whatever situation that is. And so what that Castle Doctrine does is it then shifts the burden back to the prosecutor to prove that your actions were not justified. So they now again bear the burden, but they could also potentially overcome the burden. And one of the examples that I like to give is, like, let's say your house has, like mine has, those Ring security cameras. And if those Ring security cameras show me stalking the intruder with night vision goggles and an infrared mounted AR-15, in the middle of the night with a suppressor, chances are that's not going to be beneficial to me, and the prosecutor can show that. And then, of course, the burden now falls to me again to prove that my actions were justified. And so for the purposes of this, the thing that I want to get across is, forget that the Castle Doctrine even exists from a legal perspective. You should always, always, always be going back to, are my actions satisfying the requirements of deadly force, using a firearm in deadly force under California law? And if you can do that, what the Castle Doctrine will do is it will just sort of give you this extra protection, so to speak. So that's that. So someone also posted the Penal Code 417. That's brandishing a firearm here in California. And as I mentioned, you are legally entitled to brandish a firearm if you can do so, if you can satisfy the same elements of self-defense that we've been talking about. And so you'll have to, again, prove that the brandishing of that firearm was necessary to stop the threat of imminent danger of being killed or suffering great bodily injury. And if you can do that, then like I said, you would be entitled to brandish a firearm in self-defense. But again, the caveat that I want to make here is that brandishing should not be treated as a sort of first option. It should be treated almost like a last resort option just before actually pulling the trigger. So you don't want to be immediately brandishing your firearm right out of the gate in any potential self-defense scenario. It's one of those things that it should be essentially the second to last option before actually pulling the trigger. And so always remember that, because you can still get in trouble for brandishing, as you've seen, like, for example, the couple in St. Louis, Missouri. There's some questions there whether or not the actual act of brandishing the firearm was appropriate at that particular time. Of course, if someone was charging at them, or shooting at them, that's a different story. But in this situation, it's not entirely clear based off everything that we've seen. And so that's just something to remember.
What about the, I have a question. This is Keith.
Yeah, Matt, I'm really glad you're on, because this is you're just the man I need to talk to. Hopefully you'll be able to give your information. I'd like to be able to contact you beyond this later
Yeah,
on.
I'll post my email for you guys here in the chat
Yeah.
once we're finished. So if
Oh,
you guys have
good.
questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, so Keith, why don't you hold off on your question?
Sure.
If you're going to email him and get more into depth, maybe you do it off the camera thing. Because there's a couple more questions because we want to get you up to speak. So,
Okay. Well, this question may everyone may benefit.
okay, go ahead.
Is basically what since obviously we realistically California does not respect the Second Amendment right to bear arms. So those of us who cannot get any type of CCW or any kind of right to carry a firearm, they have pepper spray, and also can you maybe talk about the pepper spray and also stun gun? That's different from the taser. That's illegal, but a stun gun is legal. Supposedly. And then maybe if you can address the knife carrying, because that's a very confusing law as I've tried to understand.
Yeah.
So the two questions. So excuse me, Matt, when you answer those two, then that will be it for you. And then we'll get, Keith. So yes, those are two, thinking the same thing. It is a good question. Yes, both of those.
So we're sort of moving away now from using a firearm in self-defense and more what you can and cannot do with the firearm as far as possession and carry, which are great questions and are completely relevant to this situation. But effectively, as some of you know, obviously, and most of you know, the Second Amendment is not afforded the full protections here in California, particularly the Ninth Circuit, which our state sits. And so we are not the Ninth Circuit has determined that the carrying of a firearm is not a right at this time, and we're working to change that. But effectively, what that means is that not everyone can get what's called a CCW permit, which would entitle an individual under California law to carry both concealed and loaded. California has restrictions generally on concealed carry, open carry, and loaded carry. There are 3 separate penal code restrictions, and so if you have a CCW, you can lawfully carry in a concealed and loaded fashion. And so that would entitle you then to be in any public place generally with that firearm, provided that you were carrying it in an appropriate manner. And so if you can't obtain the CCW or you're otherwise not lawfully entitled to carry a firearm in public spaces, there are alternatives that are available to you, as Keith mentioned. There's, for example, stun guns, pepper spray. Those types of things generally are not subject to any sort of carry restrictions like firearms are. Of course, there's issues where, like, for example, if you were to carry them through a sterile area of an airport, as an example, if you were to pass through security, that would potentially cause problems. But generally speaking, as long as the item in question itself is not considered a firearm under the laws of California, it is not subject to the firearm carry restrictions that we have. And so that's something that you would be generally entitled to, as an example, carry a stun gun or pepper spray or any other sort of less lethal self-defense item that is not a firearm per se. The knife question is actually a little bit more interesting. Generally speaking, there are limitations to what types of knives you can lawfully possess in California. For example, I believe it's stilettos, which are the push button activated type knives that are have blades on both sides that you can open with just the push of a button. Those knives are generally restricted in California, as are knives with certain blade lengths. But the issue is with the knives, usually what you're more concerned about there is actually local ordinances. For example, depending on what city you live in, that they will sometimes have restrictions on what types of knives you can carry just sort of in your pocket. But just generally speaking, if it's a standard sort of folding pocket knife, that's something that for the most part shouldn't be an issue in California, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. But again, it's still the question of, you just got to be careful about if you're going through any sort of secure area like an airport, or like a sterile area of an airport, or like entering any government building or whatnot that has metal detectors. Generally speaking, is where that's going to potentially be a problem.
Great, thank you very much. So yes, so make sure everybody's interested that on that chat have your phone number, email, whatever.
Yep.
And
See someone, Peter posted that for me. Thank you, Peter.
Like I was telling you, I keep your company's card in my wallet at all times. So if anything happens, I can just say, we talk with my lawyer. You don't want to answer any questions, talk with my lawyer. Because the more you say, the more in depth, trouble you get. So I recommend everybody to have a copy of your phone number, email, whatever, in their wallet at all times, no matter what. So if anything happens, you can refer to it or ask questions or something. Anyway, thank you very much. So now if we can get the Keith Hardeen on there
All right.
to, yeah, so Keith, I'm very glad you're on because all the stuff going on, I think it's important to be able to talk to people. And I know in hearing from you before, oftentimes what you say, you can, I mean, either escalate something way out of sight, or you can de-escalate it and bring it down where it's not, people get, it's very easy, as we all know, all of us to get just ticked off. Someone says something and next thing you know, there's a big fight. And then later on you think, why did I say a stupid thing like that? That was a dumb thing to say. So please, Keith, go ahead. Let's hear from you.
Well, it's good to see some of my friends on here. I see Miss Fuhr and Rhonda is on here. I tell you, wonderful lady, our next governor of California. No, I'm really glad that Matt was on. And after his presentation, I think that it's really fitting for me to express what I wanted to talk about. I think it really goes together. Peanut butter and jelly here. Well, see, I want to give people the reality of what I deal with. First of all, my past, I've worked 50 years. I've been a martial arts instructor and trainer, and I've trained probation officers of Los Angeles and Orange County for 10 years. I used to train probation officers in the camps. I used to visit all the camps where they keep the juveniles. And we had to come up with a series of restraint holds and restraint techniques that would not be too detrimentally dangerous for the kids, that are out of control. And at the same time, the officer's safety was, very important. The officers could use at that time pepper spray, and they used restraints, different types of, handcuffs and so forth, and, ropes, not to hang them with, but to restrain them. And so I was hired, as an independent contractor, and I used to go into the camps and train the officers. So I have a lot of experience working with law enforcement. I also trained in the detention centers in Orange County. I worked with some of those officers in the jails. So obviously they could not use firearms within those facilities, but they had to use their hands. And this is what I've come to the conclusion of after 50 years of martial arts training, that the hands would be much better to train with, at least for me. And being in California, it's rough. As Matt was saying, it would be legally very detrimental to people who would have to use a firearm, even in self-defense. You have to go through all kinds of problems. And I'm sure there are different types of attorneys and firms that specialize in that and would be able to defend you, I guess. But certainly your property would be confiscated, just as those two couples were in St. Louis. Notice how their property was confiscated, taken away before they were even, basically before they were rendered guilty of doing a crime. I mean, somebody comes into your property, they tear your gate down, and a mob of people enter your property, and you don't have a right to brandish a gun at that point. Well, I disagree with it, morally speaking, but obviously the law is going to be different. I like this quote from Frederick Bastiat, the French philosopher of 1848. Listen to this quote and see if it's not applicable to today. The law has been perverted, and the police powers of the state perverted along with it. The law, I say, not only was turned from its proper purpose, but made to follow an entirely contrary purpose. The law has become the weapon of every kind of greed. Instead of checking crime, the law itself is guilty of the evils it is supposed to punish. If this is true, it is serious. It is a serious fact and moral duty requires me to call the nation, to call attention to my fellow citizens. Now, that's what I call myself doing, calling the attention of my fellow citizens back to the law, back to the principles of the Declaration of Independence. That is where the law starts. And of course, that declaration was such an important document to adopt today. And that document is a reflection, of course, of the biblical truth of natural law, which is the revelation of God's word. And the founders believe that, and I believe that. Blackstone, Locke, Montesquieu, those people were quite instrumental in influencing the founders, especially Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration. Now, I just wanted to show you here on camera. I don't know if everybody can see this. This is a flashlight. That's all it is. It's a flashlight. Tactical flashlight. I use this and I teach self-defense. It's very interesting because it is not considered a weapon. However, it could be used as a weapon. And, you know, that's why I love to talk to Matt about these things, because you have to have something you can defend yourself with. And this gives you a little bit more power, a little more oomph, you know, when you're using it properly, only in self-defense. And it's non-lethal. The other good side about it is if someone takes it from you, if you drop it or lose it or someone takes it from you, they won't be able to use it as, you know, it won't be as deadly or detrimental against you. Whereas a firearm, if someone takes a firearm from you, if they disarm you, then they can use your own firearm against you. So you must learn hand to hand, and it's important to learn hand skills. That's what I call it. I call it tactical hands. And so I teach tactical hands. It's sort of like the principle of, you remember the story of Samson? Samson in the Bible, he encountered the Philistines. And when he saw, the Bible talks about it, I'm paraphrasing, where Samson was approached by 3,000 men, Philistines. He turned, and the Bible says he looked down upon the ground. He saw the jawbone of an ass. He picked it up and slew 3,000 men. Whether you believe it or not, it's quite interesting, an interesting story. Just like the story of David and Goliath, where David slew Goliath, the giant. David was not a man trained in war, but he knew how to use a slingshot. At that time, they had a different type of slingshot. They wanted to suit him up for battle against Goliath because he had faith that his God would deliver him. And he had strength. He had the knowledge of God's word. That was much stronger than what his hands and his arms would be able to wield a sword with. And so David said, I can't wear these things. I can't take a sword. I've got to take what I already know how to use, what I'm trained to use. And that was he was trained to use his faith. And he also used what he had, which was a slingshot. And so he fired the slingshot. The rock hit the giant right in the middle of the head, a dangerous position, a killing zone. And the giant fell over and died. And then he cut his head off with his own sword. Interesting. And even another scenario where Jesus, before he was about to be taken away to head for the cross or head for his trial, the soldiers came to get him. Peter, he took a sword, cut off one of the soldiers' ears. Jesus said, put your sword back away. It's not the time to use it. In essence, what he's telling him is use the sword properly. He who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. That means you must use the sword properly and in its proper way. Just like Matt was telling us about the firearm, using it in the proper way, reasonable force. And Jesus was the one that did not disarm them, but he told them to carry a sword. And they said, here are 2 swords, Lord. So these are stories. I just brought these scenarios up just to say that biblically speaking, the use of force has always been in a necessary sense. You know, you see it all throughout the Bible if you read it, that force had been used and many wars had been done or carried out in the name of righteousness, freedom, justice. And of course, our own American Revolution. I love it. The American Revolution, you ever think about the fact that the founders did not kill the king? Remember, they did not kill the king. They didn't. Usually tyrants would be put to death in the medieval days. But no, they didn't put to death the king. They just said, we're not going to listen to you anymore. We will become independent states. So they broke away from the king's authority. They were not resisting government. They were resisting a tyrant. There's a difference. Just like in Romans 13, there's whatever government God has set up, we should be obedient to it. Of course, the government God has set up in this nation is our Constitution through our founders. It is the Constitution of the United States, which is the highest law of the land. So what do I say with all that? I think that it's time that we, as Americans, as citizens, those of us who call ourselves even Christians, righteous in Christ, stand up to the tyranny of, say, the governor of California or the mayor of Los Angeles, where I live. These are tyrannical leaders, and we have to stand up to them. But when I say stand up, I'm not talking about form a militia such as the one that you saw with maybe the Black Panthers, or say the other militia just not too long ago, where the Black Lives Matter, the black gentleman, I don't know if he's a gentleman, but he says that we're going to take this, we're going to burn this place down if we don't get what we want. That's not what I'm talking about. So I want to be clear as to what I mean by a revolution. We go back to the revolutionary period of the founders. We have to have a revolution of ideas. We need to express the founding principles better. We need to be able to talk about the principles to those who oppose those principles. And I have a way of doing it. I have a game plan that I will be, revealing as time goes, because I offer training in this. And it's sort of like constitutional training or constitutional tactic training. And it's tactical because you are using your hands for self-defense in situations where it's absolutely necessary. And at the same time, you use your intellect, you use your words in a conversation to have a civil conversation. And it's important to learn how to control the conversation so that when your opponent comes, you're ready to give an answer. But you give that answer with courtesy and with respect. And that answer should always reflect the principles of our founding. So I always frame it as a question. It's sort of the method of Socrates, Jesus, and ultimately Columbo. Anybody remember Columbo, Peter Falk?
Yeah.
Back in the 70s? Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Yeah, he says, you mind if I ask you a question? That sort of thing. Anyway, I'm not going to take long because I wanted you to have time to ask questions or what have you. But I just laid down a basic foundation of what I'm all about here. My game plan for resisting progressive bullies is to be well-versed in hand techniques, being able to develop hand-to-hand combat techniques, as well as intellectual conversational techniques or tactics. And those conversational tactics will always reflect the Declaration principles and the Constitution. So that is my big fill of what I have to start with. Where do we go from here?
Can you give some examples of the de-escalation, words? If someone,
Okay.
you're at a Trump thing, and someone gets in your face and starts calling you, terrible things. Well, not you personally, but whatever. You get the idea.
Yeah.
Rather than get all hot and bothering, then you start hitting back. It just escalates up into then you're punching for no reason.
Well, here's one. I'll use actual experiences. I go out and I think Rhonda was there. I believe Rhonda Fearon was there at the time. We were in Torrance just recently at a Black Lives, well, it wasn't Black Lives, it was Blue Lives Matter. It was the police. We were supporting the police in Torrance. And we were on the corner there. And there were Black Lives Matter people who walked into our camp or walked into our company. And basically they were holding their signs up and so forth. One woman held a sign up. It said Black BLM. And I said, BLM, I said to her, I just said it to her and she didn't really answer, but I said, BLM. I said, does that mean Black Lives Matter or Brown Lives Matter? And the reason I said that was because she was a Latina. She was Hispanic.
Ah, very good.
And so I said, do you mean Black Lives Matter or Brown Lives Matter? So she kept looking. She didn't do anything but just stare at me. And then she said nothing. So I said, oh, well, if you mean Black Lives Matter or Brown, well, I'll agree with that. I told her. And she knew that I was on the other side. I said, I agree with that. Yeah, Black lives do matter. And then you know what I asked her after that? I said, and why do you say they matter? So I asked her, I framed it as a question, what do you mean by that? Why do you say Black lives matter? So immediately you're asking a question to get, them thinking that, you're going to disarm them at this point by asking that question. And as I said, do Black lives matter because the Declaration of Independence says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal? And see, that opened the conversation to where I wanted to go. I took control of it. And then at that point, the person said, yeah, but they didn't mean to include you because you're Black. And I said, well, if they didn't mean to include me, why did they put all men are created equal, meaning mankind? Men, meaning mankind. We know that because in the whole paragraph, it talks about mankind, not just men, as if in white men, English or British men. It meant all men are created equal. So I said, and that's basically how I had that conversation with her. And I've done that many times before. I said, if they didn't mean it for us, why didn't they say all white men or all English men were created equal? Jefferson could have easily done that because slavery was legal. And we have to remember that it was a legal institution back then. So that's one example of how I use that Socrates or Socratic method or Columbo method. And I call it a constitutional tactic. And so it gets some back-founding principles because that is your strong point, going back to the Declaration of Independence. And that's up to us to study.
Thank you. Does somebody else have a question that they can ask? Or maybe you can check the chat if there's a question.
Let's see. Well, let's see. Here's a bunch of them, but I don't know if they're for me or for Matt. There's one. There's for everyone. If there's something we can do, if someone doesn't want to engage. Oh, okay. If there is something we can do, this person's asking, this is Candace. If there is something we can do, if someone doesn't want to engage, like your Black Lives Matter sign holder. Okay, if somebody doesn't want to engage, I'm not sure exactly what they mean by that question.
Okay, I'm sorry, this is Candace, and what I meant to ask, is there something that we can do? Since your topic seems to be communicating with the other side.
Right.
And I find sometimes people just don't want to engage. And is there some way we can get past that and get them to engage with us?
Okay, well, obviously you can't make people engage with you. The best thing is to move on to the next person. It's just like sales. When you do sales, you go to one person, you ask them, the question, you give your pitch and they say no. You say, okay, thank you very much. Go to the next person. I would say I would say have that in mind, that type of attitude that, okay, I'll move past that person. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to talk about it. I'm not going to try to force it out of them. I go to the next person. There are plenty of other people to address.
Thank you.
In my context, I finally managed to find my way in. Steve.
Good.
I must have sent you about a dozen emails trying to find the password. Anyway, my concern is about doing de-escalation techniques with people trying to do you harm. Like, for example, if you are watching a strip mall and a crowd of 15, 20 people show up ready to burn the building down, how do you get them to de-escalate and go away?
Well, you have to use wisdom. You've got to use wisdom, common sense. Think about it. If you get about 10, if 5 or 6, 7, 8 people show up ready to loot or riot like they were doing in Santa Monica and other places, as the Antifa, those type of people, if they are that unreasonable, they're not going to listen to you. You just end up getting hurt or beaten up. that's your chance you have to take. But I would not try to stop a mob of people, with anything less than probably an Uzi. But no, I wouldn't try to stop a mob of people. There's a time to, it's fight or flight. There's a time to move on or to move away from it. That's what I would do personally. But, if they're coming towards me and I'm surrounded, then I'll fight like hell to try to, preserve my life. I'll do the best I can in that situation. And I'm trained to a certain degree. I am trained, to handle, your average person. I'm trained to handle, I believe, most people that would come at me. But then if you get a mob of people, I'm no match for a mob of people.
I'm just thinking, for example, there's a group in South Philly that did this, Stand Up South Philly. And they had people coming down to the local Target, and they sent about 15 burly guys down there. And when the looters showed up, they just said, they basically said, you don't want to do that here. Go do that somewhere else, but don't do that here. They were able to persuade them to go away without anybody having to end up on CNN.
Well, you see that presented just the fact that you said burly guys showed up. That in itself was a deterrent. It's kind of like you pull out your pepper spray or you pull out your stun gun. I'm only referring to as far as in Los Angeles, California. Or if you have something that is greater than yourself, or more people that'll stand with you, yes, then by all means you could. That serves as a deterrent, an effective deterrent.
Right.
That makes sense? That makes sense?
No, it does. But that's kind of the lines along which I'd like to discuss things eventually.
Well, maybe you could get in contact, with Keith off camera, in the future and ask questions more on a personal level. Like Lisa Korn asked a question, what should my son do if his car gets surrounded on the way home from work? And if they surround your car and start breaking windows, can you hit the gas or do you end up in jail or what? That's what,
I would gas. I've told my wife, I said, if you're out there, I told my wife this, I says, she works for the district attorney in Los Angeles here downtown. But I told her, I said, if you ever get into that situation, you hit the gas, you just go. I mean, you may have to see, here's the thing I want to say also, there are situations in history, if we look out throughout history, where violence has been used or men have defended themselves, women, what have you. There's always a consequence. There's a consequence even when you're right. There's a consequence that will be pushed against you or forced against you. In other words, the law, I just read it here from Bastiat. The law is perverted. If the law is perverted, the law itself is not perverted, maybe, but the people who exercise or are in control of the law, they are the ones who are exercising it improperly. Then if you have that situation in society, which is exactly the way it is today, give you an example. Well, you know what I'm trying to say. You do what you have to survive. That's the most important thing. And if later on there are consequences that come back at you, then that's where you have to trust God to get you out of it, because God will deliver you. He will strengthen you in time of need for those of you who trust and understand God. I think that's a very important element that is never brought up, in our day. This is why the founders and many of the great heroes and patriarchs of faith, all of these people suffered, and some suffered greatly. All the founders, after they signed that Declaration of Independence, the king was ready to hang them. They were on the, on the list to be hung. They were treasoner. They were considered treason. So we may be considered treasoners, to those who, don't wear a mask, for example. If I don't wear a mask, I'm a traitor to my society. I'm out to, I'm going to hurt you if I don't wear a mask, and therefore I must be punished with fines or imprisonment. This is what has been already judged against us by the governor. I'm just giving you that as an example. So, you take it from that angle there.
someone asked a question on chat about what is the, and I don't know what it is, but the 1619 project with the Supreme Court? What is that?
The 1619 project, I know what that is. That's the changing of our history. in 1619, the first slaves were brought here, African slaves in the ships. But of course, none of them were on the Mayflower. The Mayflower Compact was settled in 1620, but it was signed. But they were not, these slaves were brought here. They were slaves that were brought here. And they're trying to say in the 1619 project, that teaching, they're changing history to say, teaching our kids that the United States started slavery or began slavery, or say was the main proponent of slavery starting back in 1619. And the United States was not formed until 1776. It was the United States, and then the Constitution. By the time the Constitution was signed, and by 1787 or 89, then the government was officially, our constitutional republic. So our form of government was not really established until 1776.
Another question, how do you like address people who are demanding on being the reparations?
Yeah,
Japanese got paid off, why not us? Which just makes
Okay.
sense.
Well, here's how you can use, and again, you don't have to be that knowledgeable to use these techniques. I want people to remember this as you hang up here. There are two primary questions that you should always ask. What do you mean by that? And how did you come to that conclusion?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, what do you mean by that? And how did you come to that conclusion? Think about it. If somebody says, well, I want reparations. Well, what do you mean by reparations? Just ask them. And then just be quiet and listen for the, don't say anything else. Just say, what do you mean by reparations? What does that mean? I'll guarantee you, probably most people couldn't explain it. I bet Matt could explain that from the legal standpoint, what reparations are. You repair the damage. Well, if reparations is a repairing of the damage that was done, well, is there anybody on this call or anybody on this Zoom meeting that was alive during the time of slavery? Or were they directly involved or engaged in holding slaves? I don't think so. Everyone's dead. There are no, I don't think any generations, maybe Ginsburg, I don't know, but I don't think anybody's old enough to have been there. So you don't owe any reparations directly. And then again, there's another question you could say as well. You say reparations. Well, who was the primary advancer of slavery? In other words, who advanced slavery? Who were the primary people? And what party was it? It was the Democrat Party. So do Democrats owe reparations? Is the Democrat Party going to apologize for slavery? Because they were the ones that held slave. It was the Democrat Party that further brought back slavery after it had been pretty much almost abolished. See, slavery had almost ended by the end of 1700, 1795, I think it was, or 97. In most of the states, slavery had been stopped and pretty much almost abolished. Vermont was the first to abolish it. And then by 1800, and then by the after the 1850, the Missouri Compromise in 1820, and going on into 1850, Kansas-Nebraska Act, slavery came back, and the KKK was formed, and that was the Democrat Party, all the Democrat Party. So that's how you would how I address the reparations thing. That's one way. Those are a couple of ways, actually.
That's great. That's wonderful. Somebody else has a question? A lady's raising her hand.
Yes, Keith, thank you very much for the presentation. That was very nice. I do want to add something, but actually not to what you said, but to what the gentleman said before you about guns. We've all heard that people are buying guns, and most of us feel good about it because we think that a lot of conservatives are buying guns. Now, for those of you who know me, my area of interest is Islam. And I want to tell you that the clergy, the imams in the mosques are asking Muslims to arm themselves. So a lot of the guns that are being bought by Muslims. And there is a very strong coalition of Islamic radicals and the left who are working together. I just wanted to pass that on to you. You can look it up. It is something that we have to be careful of, because the Islamists have never put down their war. They are at war with us, and they are using the left to get to us. So we have to be careful. And they're buying guns.
Well, so that brings up a good question. Keith, how would you handle a situation where somebody is trying to say basically that our like religion is the best one, and I don't know, it just seems like I've seen that, quite a bit on different things. So people are responding to like Islam, saying all kinds of weird stuff. I didn't study it like so much like that, so I don't really know. But how would you engage somebody that is I don't know, pro-Islam, that whatever? I'm not quite sure of the question actually.
Well, I would, yeah, I actually, I work and I train, in the martial arts. I train with Islamic, with some Islamic people, friends. Actually, they're not all bad. I mean, there are people who practice the real, I guess you might say, whatever is considered to them the real Islam. Those are the dangerous ones. Actually, the ones who practice in America, those who are Islamic and they are American citizens, many of them are harmless as far as I can see, because I know a lot of them, a lot of Black Muslims. That's all I can say about that. But, here's the thing I would say. I talk to them all the time, and I'm talking from experience. And these are strong Muslims, but, they just have a different different belief system, I guess, than the Muslims of the Middle East. But here's what I say to my Muslim friends. I say, the Declaration of Independence is a very interesting document, because we talk about, the Christian God, Christ. Well, the Bible mentions Christ as, the creator. He is the one who created all things, and all things are made by him and are in him. It talks about that in Colossians. And then he's also talked about as the supreme judge of the world. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson mentions that they appealed to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of their intentions. I like that. That gives you a good, proper judgment as to how to use reasonable force. And that also leads to the laws of nature and of nature's God. That's another principle in the Declaration. It's in the first paragraph. The laws of nature. The laws of nature, James Wilson, a signer of both the Constitution and Declaration, said the laws of nature and the laws of nature's God both come from the same source. They are divine revelation, and they are of nature. So this is the way we used to believe. This is the way we were taught in schools. But now they've abandoned all that idea. And finally, the last one would be with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So it is divine providence, the hand of God. Almighty God intervened in the affairs of men. That's what Benjamin Franklin said. So you see how I've intermixed American history with the Bible and the whole concept of Christianity, Judeo-Christianity. Moses being the first representative, form of representative government to the Israelites. Okay, and they had a representative form of government back then. So there are many things in the Bible that are reflected in the founders' writings and in those documents that we need to learn. That's why I think it's so vital to learn those documents. I call it, and that's why I call it constitutional tactics for defending natural rights in our American Republic. If we are to save this nation or bring this nation around, it's going to have to be by patriot, God-loving citizens, God-fearing citizens. And again, I'm not worried about other people who are violent. I'm not worried about Antifa. I'm not worried about Islam. I'm not as worried about all of them. I really am not. You know who I'm worried about? I'm worried about Ocasio-Cortez. I'm worried about Joe Biden, those kind of people. I'm worried about the Democrat Party in this country, Nancy Pelosi. I'm worried about those Americans who call themselves Americans, who have the appearance of being Americans, but they hate America. Those are the people I'm more concerned about. You know, the ones that commit open violence, I'm prepared for them. I can get just as violent, because for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction, but only in self-defense. Right? Even Christ said that same thing about the measure that you meet, the measure that is met against you, or the measure that you meet will be met against you. The same thing as, you know, for every action, there's equal opposite reaction. Before I close out, though, I wanted to quote a scripture, if you don't mind, sir. Is it all right,
Please,
Steve?
that'd be great. Yes.
Here is a very interesting scripture. Unless you had questions, are there any more questions, Steve? I can answer.
Anybody have questions? But at least you posted your email and your phone number. I think anybody who does have further questions should send you emails, and then you can get more in depth than just what you can do in half an hour. I mean, you can't save the world in 30 minutes. So
no, and
so,
everybody remember, please call me. It's okay to use the phone. Peter, it's okay. Peter, Steve, you can give out my, you have my contact.
yes, it's on the,
give out my phone number, my,
on the chat too. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Well, since nobody has a question, here's the quote. I love this quote. I think it's appropriate for today, especially those of you. And again, I don't take it for granted that everywhere I go, you know, when I speak like this, it takes a certain amount of boldness on my part, because, you know, I am a Christian, and I don't disrespect others' religious beliefs or anything, but, you know, I don't assume that everyone is a Christian. But I just want to read this, and this is interesting, from the book of Revelation. This is Christ speaking to the church. He says this: because you have patiently obeyed me despite the persecution. Interesting. Because you have patiently obeyed me despite the persecution, therefore I will protect you from the time of great tribulation and temptation, which will come upon the whole world to test everyone alive. Now that's very interesting. Look, I am coming soon. Hold fast tightly to the little strength that you have, and that no one will take away your crown. Now that's very interesting. We are on the defensive in the sense that all we have to do is hold the line. Those of us who believe that Christ will return and he will judge the earth, and this nation and all other nations will go through, they're going to go through quite a bit of you think this is bad, it's going to get worse. But those who have faith, use your faith. That's the only thing that'll deliver you and give you strength. You know, your gun, it may deliver you from some things, but that's not going to be good enough. At that point, you know, our guns won't be enough. Our pepper spray won't be enough. Or any of that, or the police, or any of that, or military, none of that will be enough. What we need is faith. We need strength, spiritual understanding of God's protection plan. And so that's what I offer people, is to teach them about that and advance that idea of a protection plan. All right.
Keith, thank you very much. Just for the other people, just for information, I like your two questions. What do you mean by that, and how did you come to that conclusion? Those two, I want to post that on my Facebook thing from saying that, because I think that is, I mean, that is a lot powerful than getting in someone's face and yelling and screaming. Those two questions are so disarming. I mean, it's very simple, but disarming. And
yes.
I just like to add for the people on here, one like de-escalation technique is basically, they say, if someone raises their voice, if you can be more calm than them, then that's actually like a calming thing. Because I mean, if they raise their voice and then you raise your voice, then they raise theirs, then you keep going up and up. Whereas someone's, you know, yelling and screaming back isn't going to do anything. But if you can try to stay calm, like you said, use your faith, stay calm, and just ask these two questions. You know, they're ranting and raving, and just say, well, well, what do you mean by that? Then they're like, but they were like expecting a fight. And then you say this, it's like, I wasn't expecting this. That throws them completely off guard. I just love that. So I really appreciate those two things you said. I think if we can remember anything from what you said tonight, those two questions are it. I love that. And I appreciate that, Keith, and thank you. Anybody else has any questions, ask Keith, call him, send him emails, because I think what he's said, I think this is so wonderful. That's why I wanted him back on here, because what he said when I first saw him on, you know, one of our meetings, I thought, I love this. This is so great. We need to learn this stuff.
Hey, Steve, do you have time for Rachel? I think Rachel wants to ask.
Okay,
something.
yes,
Seems
yes,
like-
go ahead. Yes, okay with me.
Rochelle. No, I
Rochelle.
wanted to ask you, Keith, when would you start your program? I'm really interested and I want to join you.
Well, I could use everyone's help on this one. I am willing to come. I will come, and I will come to you. In other words, if we gather a group of people, if you want to get a group of people somewhere where they're willing to come, I'll come to you. And
Well,
I'll
I
do
think all of us are interested. I mean, speaking for me, but I have a feeling that this is so beneficial and it's good for everybody. So maybe Steve at our next meeting or something.
talk about it.
Yeah, in the future. Yeah, possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I'm willing to do it, folks. I'm ready. This is my calling. I've got to do it.
Well, we so appreciate it to get like an alternate.
And I was
view
so
of things.
inspired. And I was very inspired tonight by Camille. I'm looking at her on video there. I saw her, and she was, she gave a lot of reference to, the Lord. And I just want to thank that. I want to thank you for that, Camille, because if we don't raise up, if we don't exalt the Lord Jesus, we're not going to win anything.
That's right.
The way we're going.
Absolutely.
So
It's the biggest
there-
deal we have.
okay.
Haley just got home.
Hey.
Yes.
Oh, look who's there. All
Oh,
right.
twins.
Oh, they are. They're twins. Okay.
Yeah, we're twisters. A year and a half apart, but might as well be twins.
And I thank all of you guys. You guys are wonderful people. I love you. Rhonda's
Thank
there. I see Rhonda. I'm just looking at different videos here. All right. I don't know what happened to Peter though. He's gone.
I'm here.
Okay,
Oh.
Peter, any last whatevers? There you are, finally.
Any other questions? Are we gonna wrap it up with Camille and Haley? So I guess Camille and Haley, if we could end it with God Bless America, and
Absolutely.
Great,
Sure.
wonderful. Oh,
we got a duo this time.
What I do But I know there. No, just something. Yes. I'm sorry. I enjoyed your speech so much, Mr. Keith.
Thank you.
Very, very inspiring. It makes me realize when they're, leaders in life, everybody wants to push the leader forward and say, "You're amazing. Do something awesome. We want to follow you." And you're definitely very followable. So I would love to follow more of the stuff you do. It's a great group here. Okay, ready? You can pick melody. Yeah, me or you. I'll do it. Here we go. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home. Thank you.
Actually,
wonderful.
can we, I should have done it first, but can we get a duo with the Trump song with both of you guys?
Absolutely. Yes. Haley is here. I had to sing the national anthem by myself. Okay. That's pretty good. What are you doing? You're going to go right there. I'm going to go right there. Not unless she's always on that side. It just doesn't, it's not feeling right. Here we go. Right there. Okay. So Haley has written 400 poems. She writes some of our best songs as a group. We have 5 albums of music. I'll write a ton of songs and she'll help me finish them, but then the ones that she writes by herself, everybody likes. They're like, who wrote that song? But she's a very talented sister, also a very talented stage actor. So we're excited. We live in Branson, Oklahoma, Branson, Missouri now. We just moved from Oklahoma. But she also helped me write this song. So this a good tempo? It's a little slow, but okay. Come on, you tell me. You start it, right? Keep America great. Keep America great. Stick to our guns. Keep the freedom we want. Keep America great. There will never be another USA. Freedom won't come back if we give it away. It's time to vote. It's time to pray. It's short as one. Let me hear you say, vote Trump. 2020. Yo, Trump. 2020. Vote Trump. 2020. Vote Trump. Okay, Bailey, here we go. Keep America first. Keep America strong. We are all in the fight for our God-given rights. Keep America one. 1, 2, 3, 4. There will never be another USA. Freedom won't come back if we give it away. It's time to vote. It's time to pray. If you love your flag, let me see it wave. Vote Trump. 2020. Yo, Trump. 2020. Vote Trump. 2020. Vote Trump. More years. Come on, everybody, more years. Come on, everybody, more years. There will never be another USA. Freedom won't come back if we give it away. It's time to vote. It's time to pray. It's short as one. Let me hear you say, vote Trump. 2020. Go Trump. 2020. Vote Trump. 2020. Vote Trump. Keep America great. Keep America great.
Great, wonderful.
Much better to sing it together.
All right. So I'll keep it open for if people want to get the contact information in the chat. If anybody has any announcements, events you want to put out there that are coming up that you want to get out to everybody. Sandy, do you have any events that you know of?
Nothing's coming to my mind. It's,
I know actually this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. There is going to be a memorial for Ashley Wells down at Esplanade and Avenue A. She was killed in that accident last week.
Are you talking to Ashley Wells? Is that our Black girlfriend?
Yeah.
She is very young.
She was 23 years old. She was killed in that car accident on Crenshaw and 190th.
I didn't know that. Oh my God.
So they're gonna have the family. They're doing a little. They don't want it publicized on social media because they don't want to draw a crowd. But it's Saturday night at 7:30. If you want to bring food, bring a table to put it on.
And where is that going to be?
Esplanade and Avenue A. Down there at the beach.
Okay.
And Mason, I'll probably send a thing out tomorrow, the night before.
I'm sorry, Peter. When was she killed?
It was last week. It was that accident that happened at 11:30 in the evening. The driver was recklessly driving up Crenshaw or something.
My very good friend and my attorney, Mark Angelucci, was killed last Saturday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He was gunned down by a hitman at the front door of his house up in Crestline. It's been international news now for several days, and we Rhonda Baldwin Kennedy contacted the FBI, and we have an investigation underway. So it's we're losing a lot of good people here. I can't believe Ashley, that young girl, is gone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's sad.
That's unbelievable.
I'll send that email out. There is a GoFundMe page available too. So, it will come out tomorrow night.
I think I met her first at the event to support Torrance Police.
Yeah, it's being put on through the family and the Redondo Beach Police Department.
Remember, she had a what do you call it? A PA thing that she was speaking from.
Yeah. All right. So with that, I guess we'll end it. It's 8:30. Thank you, Camille and Haley.
Thank you for having us. It's really wonderful.
If you ever make it out to California, let us know, and we're able to have meetings again. We'd love to have you guys back.
Yeah,
Oh,
Peter's
thank you
buying
for
lunch.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. We're actually from California, San Jose.
Oh,
That's we love California. We go back sometimes in the summers to Modesto, Morgan Hill, San Francisco area. So
Silicon Valley.
yeah.
We'll
we
make
live in
sure.
Northridge.
Hopefully, we'll watch you on the convention.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't know exactly. Yeah, like I said, I don't know if we'll get to sing on the main stage or not. So praying, that'd be awesome. We'd love to support him. You know, so
yeah,
excited.
that'd be great. Wow.
To be there, just to be there is a huge honor.
Yeah,
right? And just
Yes, yeah.
it's a big honor. All right. So
Thank
if anybody else doesn't have anything else, I guess we could sign off. Thank you for coming, and hopefully we want to have in-person meetings again, but we're limited to what we could do. I thought tonight was good.
Is there anybody interested in forming a local defense organization?
Sounds good. Say more about it.
I'll join with you guys. Anything you want, anything I can do in terms of training.
Well, what I'm trying to get business owners involved. What I've found is that Neighborhood Watch is focused on neighborhoods. It's been suggested by the members of the Sheriff's Department, the community relations officers, that CERT might be a good place to start. But I'm looking, because I figure, you know, if I had a business and people were going around burning down businesses, I wouldn't want to have to sleep in my business every night for weeks and weeks.
No.
And I figure with people organized, you know, 2 or 3 people can watch 20 or 30 businesses. And then people can make watch schedules, and people can volunteer. People can train in advance. They can practice communications protocols. They can collaborate with the local police departments. They can get the proper radio frequencies or whatnot. They can train in their own self-defense so that they can be effective to protect their communities from destruction. Because only I figure about a year and a half before many of the dozen or so police officers around the country who've been charged, that they'll be acquitted of the more serious crimes with which they've been charged, and people will use that as an excuse to go out and do the same types of things they've been doing. If we could trust the political leaders, then and see, the problem the police have is they have, just like the military, you respond to a civilian chain of command. So if your chain of command tells you to stand down, you can't do anything. Which means we need to be prepared. If we're not prepared, then what's the alternative? That we get burned out? And if we're not trained, we end up on TV like the McCloskeys, instead of preparing in advance. See, there was advance notice that there was going to be a demonstration in their neighborhood, if they had a local organization and could show up with 15 burly guys like the people did in South Philly, maybe they wouldn't be all over TV with an AR-15 in their hand.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm looking, I figure we have a year to prepare, and I'm looking to coordinate with anybody and try to get more and more people involved so that we have an effective defense organization.
Wow, that's great.
Awesome.
And I figure if we can trade notes with other groups around the country and share best practices and lessons learned, it could basically be almost like kind of franchising your idea around the country. If people don't stand up, they're not going to be prepared. And rather than sitting on your hands and being flat-footed and going, gee, isn't it a shame that I have no place to shop because the entire mall's been burned down, and my grocery store and my Walmart and everything else, and I guess what do? Do I go down to the food bank now or get a handout? You know, we have time to prepare, so we ought to prepare.
Sounds good. Well, I'm ready to train, ready to get people, you know, prepared.
Right.
So
So the Harris sisters, you don't collaborate with other artists to do a compilation CD of songs for the campaign?
We haven't yet. So we just got a guy named Bryson Creates. What's his last name?
I don't know.
He did the MAGA challenge, and he just told us that he wants Bryson Gray, maybe. He just told us that he wants to do a collaboration, and so that'd be really cool. So we'll find out.
I know when I found out that President Obama won the election, I was in Guyana in Port Kaituma, and they had a great CD that was being sold all over the Caribbean, because I also saw it in the Dominican Republic that year, with songs by Steel Pulse and all about 15 different bands that had Obama songs. And I think it'd be great if you could get together with other people and come out with a Trump campaign CD.
That would be awesome, actually. That's a brilliant idea. Where our next project is a patriotic CD. It's like America the Beautiful, Battle of the Republic, and everything. But that takes a lot of money to do, you know, like $10,000 for a good project. So that might take a little while to raise the money or whatever, Kickstarter or something. But doing a MAGA, you know, compilation CD is actually a brilliant idea, because there's probably a lot of people that have songs already, even from the first election, that could still be used.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people would buy it. They might even use it as a fundraiser.
Yeah, we're doing a Women for Trump fundraiser in Virginia in October, I believe October 4th. So that'd be a good thing to prepare for. That'd be awesome.
Don't forget to do a popular holidays CD so that your Christmas song gets played every year by Coast Radio when they play all their Christmas songs.
Oh, you'll have to tell us about that. We have a Christmas album. We wrote 7 of the songs.
There you go. There you go. Just make sure they have a copy.
Well, okay, I'll have to get that from you, because I don't know a lot of radio stations. We're so under marketed. We don't do marketing very well. So
no, most entertainers
help we could possibly get. Huh?
Yeah, most entertainers don't. I mean, they have people to do it for them. That's what
agents.
Yeah, we like our freedom too much to have a record label. But maybe we'll change our minds. You never know. But thank you for the idea.
Well, you can always market the way that Moby did, right? Moby did everything on the internet. He didn't have a record label.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, and a marketer or a promoter or something like that, like Mr. Keith is saying, yes, we do need that, or an agent or someone that can help us. And you know, so if you have any ideas, send them over, because
you have a YouTube channel.
a YouTube channel. So that's awesome because it's through the Trump song.
Is it monetized?
We just signed up for that.
Okay.
So yeah, so that we've got around almost 10,000 followers now on that. So that's pretty crazy. It was 1,000, almost 2,000 before, and jumped to almost 10. So like, whoa, that's different.
Did you publish it in the chat?
No, I can if I can figure that out. It's Camille and Haley, or youtube.com/Camille and Haley. And thesisterduo.com, thesisterduo.com, and that will lead you to all of our things, all of our links. Chat, and I'll put it in the chat right here too. Okay. Does this thing like go anywhere afterwards so people can see it in the future, or does it all disappear after we?
It's being recorded.
Awesome.
Yeah, Peter's got it all recorded.
I'm saying as far as, yeah, can we look at people's questions and links and information as well?
I think it only for a short period.
Yeah, until I think the chat goes off when we sign off.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll keep it. Yeah, I'll keep it for people who have time to write it down.
You can cut and paste it.
Yeah.
There is a way to save. There is a way to save it, but I tried to do it, but I couldn't figure out how to do it.
Okay.
I took screenshots of things I wanted to keep from the conversation. So. Okay, I sent over the website and our YouTube channel for anyone who wants.
And if you click on the club's webpage at the top, there's the link for the club's YouTube channel. You can view tonight's you could view tonight's meeting on YouTube through the Cities Republicans YouTube channel.
Okay, good deal. I'll put our YouTube, our Facebook, by the way, too, for anyone who wants to find us on there.
How many people in this organization are volunteering at naturalization ceremonies?
I don't know.
You know, my experience has been, I mean, before the COVID, my experience had been that when I would go down to the convention center to volunteer for voter registration, there'd be maybe 2 or 3 Republicans and about 60 Democrats.
Yeah. I know that's something that it's hard because of work.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. It only happens once every few months. And if you're going to sell something, you want to sell something to people who are looking for your product.
Yeah.
Right? Spending time sitting in front of Walmart, walking precincts, calling people up on the phone, people don't want to be bothered then. But when they're at a naturalization ceremony, they're looking for your product. And most people register the same party as their other family members when they first register to vote. With chain immigration, each person you register is going to be responsible for about 5 other family members becoming citizens. So you have a very big return on investment if you spend your time and effort registering new citizens to vote. And when you do that, you don't want to just register them to vote. You also want to sign them up for your local Republican club so they can go to monthly meetings. Because that way, you know, it's just like when you convert to a religion, right? You want to get involved and you want to start doing things, and that's when you're really interested in doing things. So if you do that, you're going to eventually build the infrastructure to change the numbers on the ground. If we don't change the numbers on the ground in LA County, this state is always going to be 75% Democrat in the legislature. But the key to winning this state is going to be LA County. It's right at the heart, and frankly, having been a teacher all over LA County, I'll tell you that the high school essays I read on the east side of the county and most of the Hispanic neighborhoods read like Republican and Libertarian essays. Most of the Mexicans that have immigrated to California and the US, I don't know about Texas, but the California, they come from the Mexican states where the PAN has been winning, not the PRI, which is the closest thing they have to Republicans. They're the people who come from the areas that fought the Cristero War against the socialists. So they're coming from the conservative parts of Mexico, which means that they have more affinity for family values of the Republican Party than they have for the socialist values of the Democrats right now.
Wow, that's
Well,
no, that's encouraging to know, Rob.
So,
Thank
you know, I think if we capture that community, which right now only has about 22% vote share, right? Only 22% of the Hispanics who are eligible to vote bother to vote. I think if we can capture that community, we will turn it around in this county. You know, you look at almost every district in LA County that's represented by somebody who's African American. The majority population in that district is Hispanic. But the reason why African Americans are elected is because there's like about a 78% vote share for that community. So the key is we need to change the numbers on the ground. And if we have a concerted effort to do that over the course of 10 years, we will flip this state. And if we flip this state, there's going to be 53 electoral college votes that are going to come with it, maybe 55. We have what? We have 53 Congress people and then 2 senators, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of votes that come with that. You know, that'll change the elections nationally. But the heart of this is LA County. If you look at almost any map of California and look at election results, almost the entire state is red, except for 3 counties that are predominantly Democrat. And because of those 3 counties, 75% of our legislature is Democrat.
Wow.
So the key is this county. You know, the Democrats did that in Orange County, and they flipped a couple of Republican congressional seats in the last election.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the Democrat Club emails and their newsletters and stuff, that's why they have 60 people down at the naturalization ceremonies.
What's up, Mario? I said what's up earlier.
You know, we're a party that believes in competition. We need to compete better.
While you were talking, I found out how you can save the chat. If you go down to where you put in the chat and change it to where it says everyone and it says file, there's 3 little dots. If you have those 3 though, it says more. Open that up.
Chat.
And
Got it.
save chat, and it'll save it to your. Yeah, I knew there's a way.
Nice.
So I'll let everybody so have a chance to save that to your computer, and it saves it into a Zoom file on your hard drive as a text Word file.
So Keith, where are you located? Unfortunately, I got in halfway through your presentation because I spent 50 minutes looking for the password and was extremely frustrated. Those guys are going to find like about a dozen emails from me going, "Where is this password? Where's this password?" But
Always call Peter. Yeah, always call. That's what I had to do. But anyway, yeah. I'm in Los Angeles, right, just between Silver Lake and Mid Wilshire. You know, Koreatown. So,
okay. Well, yeah, I noticed nobody rioted in Koreatown this time around.
Oh no. Okay.
Well, I guess they have a reputation.
Yes, they do. They protect theirs.
Well,
Even fence.
I guess it would be the Korean Grocers Association, probably.
Probably. I mean, these are great people. I tell you that much. I trained with them in the martial arts.
Right.
So,
what do you think? What do you think? How do you think we could best organize something and franchise that idea?
oh boy, you know, it's hard to get people to do things on our side. You know, conservatives, it's just hard to get them to get up and move.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Right now, you know, somebody said to me once, they said, "Conservative, what are you conserving?" Now it's quite clear what we're conserving.
Or
right?
trying. Yeah,
Right?
I agree. I
Because
agree.
if you, what are you conserving? You're conserving your 250-year-old mission that gets burned down, right?
Yep.
You're conserving what they had, like 6 or 8 churches that were burned the same night. Your statues, the you know, everything's getting torn down.
Yeah, I agree. Well,
And frankly, I'm of the mind that you know, the president has a reputation for constantly being on the offensive on Twitter, right?
yeah,
You know, I look at things like the people who were frustrated up in Martinez, California, and ended up being charged with felony hate crimes for painting over Black Lives Matter with black paint in front of the Martinez City Hall. You know, and they said, well, those people had a permit, and you defaced, you know, you did graffiti and defaced a public mural. And I said, well, if they had a permit, you know, the government can't grant permits and discriminate with respect to First Amendment message content, right?
right.
So why aren't we going out and doing asking for permits to put up other murals all over the streets of Martinez or any other city?
Oh boy.
You know,
Wow.
why not have a giant Trump 2020 mural down the middle of Broadway?
Oh, they'd probably burn it down.
But my point is, you know, if they can do that, we can do that.
Sure.
Pro-life.
We could do that. We could put pro-life down the middle of the street.
March for life.
That's
You
right.
know? Why not?
That's right.
Why not? Because that's a message that's got lots of people behind it, right? So you have a lot of people who could do the petitions and show up at the meetings and go, yeah, we want this permit. And, you know, sometimes, uh-oh, our Zoom ran out.
Oh, that's it.
Oh, no. Okay. That's the Ashley Wells Memorial.
Yeah,
I see.
this
You
is gonna
changed-
go out tomorrow, so,
Okay.
but that's the info.
But you know, like for example, when people do reputation defense on the internet because they get a whole bunch of bad reviews of their business, one of the easiest ways to do that is you just bury stuff in the in a whole bunch of good comments, right?
Yeah.
So if you feel upset that people are doing things, which is really trying to poke the president in the eye, there's no reason why we can't do the same things. And pretty soon, when all your streets have murals all up and down the streets, everything gets drowned out.
Right. It seems like when we try to do things, though, what the left, the left, it's almost as if they're not really regarded when they break the law. We have to dot our I's and cross our T's.
No, but you know what? The NAACP had to go through that whole route for about 50 years, right? One case after another, after another, after another. We just need to do everything the procedural way that it's supposed to be done. Bring the lawsuit when the permit's denied, and just keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing.
Well, I hope that works, during the election, because there's going to be a lot of fraud this year. I anticipate.
Well,
you happen to know that Judicial Watch is doing that in DC, but they still haven't gotten the.
Yeah.
They've been working on it for 2 weeks now. I doubt it'll ever come.
That's right.
Have you tried making baby back ribs in it yet?
I think the thing that's going to flip the election results, really, I thought Trump was a shoo-in for a massive vote, but the economy being poor, I figure that the thing that's going to flip it is going to be a vaccine. If we have vaccines out by October, I think it'll be a surefire Trump victory.
With a caveat though, because vaccines can often have a downside where people have bad reactions to the vaccines, and that's already being reported for Moderna.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially this early.
Yeah.
So vaccines, it's a bit early to get that.
Anything they can use against them, they're going to use against them, even if they have to just make it up.
Exactly, sir. He's absolutely right. Because they're going to push this into the election time. They're going to push COVID. You know,
It doesn't
I mean,
really
we-
pay to defend against those guys, the left. I mean, their
Yeah.
whole game is to just make up stuff and just keep you on the back foot.
Sure. Sure.
What we need is offense of some sort.
But in a sense, what you're doing is you're giving them enough rope to hang themselves.
Yeah. Well, see, that's what I
Because-
said.
Because you look at institute or outlets like CNN. You know, there was a time that CNN had a reputation as a pretty good news outlet, especially during the first Gulf War. You know, and things have gone right downhill.
But
I mean, and they've become so stridently anti-Trump that people don't even trust their journalism anymore. You know, it took the New York Times with the woman that just resigned with the open resignation letter. You know, those types of things happening, eventually they're going to lose their market share.
Wow. I think history repeats itself. We were always underdogs from the founding of this nation all the way to today. And if we will look to appeal to that higher authority, you know, the appeal to the supreme judge of the world, as the Declaration declares, I believe that we can receive divine help. That's how Trump got in the first time, I believe. I mean, I didn't vote for him the first time because I like those two sisters. I was skeptical about what he would do because I didn't know him in terms of what he would do politically. But when he got in there, I said, wow, this is the man that I'm going to support next time.
In the second debate with Hillary Clinton, I made my decision, and the decision I made was whoever wins is going to have 3,000 political appointees running the government, and that they're not going to be picked by that person. They're going to be picked by a committee. And I want the policies of one side, not the other side.
Well, if Biden gets in there, he'll be a puppet, that's for sure.
I know. I
Yeah,
understand.
We don't want him.
How
So,
long do your Zooms run before they run out, before they kick you off?
I don't know.
We could go as long as we want, but I don't want to be here until midnight.
I figured I'd take the advantage of the opportunity to chat with people as long as you had it running.
Yeah,
But I have your contact info, so I'll contact you, Mr. Hardin.
I can go for a few more. I can go for 5 more minutes.
All right. Well, anybody that wants to contact me, that'll be great. I would be glad to, because see, there's some other groups, Republican groups that I know of that want to set up this training as well. And I think the training will be good. Remember those 2 questions, guys. What do you mean by that? And how do you come to that conclusion? That's what I've been asking ever since they've been telling me I have to wear a mask. I say, well, how'd you come to that conclusion? And nobody's answered it yet in a logical way.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with your music careers, ladies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, they're still there. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I did download your ringer. I have your ringer. Actually, I got to add it on my replacement phone.
That's so cool. We had a new friend, our old friend that's in Branson today. He drove us around to the, we were at the mask, we were standing against the mask at the courthouse. They were trying to get Branson to wear masks. And his ringer came on and it was our song. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy.
Wow.
Oh, Mr. Keith, what would you say is your best argument for not wearing masks?
Oh boy, I've got a bunch of them. I got a whole lot of arguments. Well,
Yeah. I was trying to think of what I'd say to them if they interviewed me or something, you know?
Oh, I see. Well, tell them this. I mean, if you're wearing the mask, it is a fact. I mean, they've already studies show. I mean, if you want to get scientific about it, because you know they're always saying we follow the science. So you say, what do you mean? What science are you following? Ask the question. Are you following the science that says by wearing a mask, you could possibly lower your immune system and your oxygen levels by 10 or 15%, because the that's, if you don't want to go into detail, you just say
by, ask it, frame it as a question. Do you mean you follow the science that by wearing a mask, you could lower your oxygen levels and immunity and immune system, which could make you more vulnerable to the disease or to catching a virus? Or do you follow the science that really is no science? Because they haven't really explained why they think the mask could protect you. I see no science on that side. They just say, wear
There
the
you
mask.
have. I give it to you, Keith.
I mean, really.
The issue about following the science really falls right into the same mindset, though. It's a bunch of people who think they have all the answers. They're smarter than everybody else, and we're just a bunch of yokels, right? And they sit on TV and they smirk and they make smug comments. And I mean, I can't even watch late night TV anymore.
Hey, I have a clarification about that, though. First of all, there's different kinds of masks, right? There's just an ordinary bandana, and then you can go up to a gas mask. So not all masks can actually protect you from something you might breathe in. Only gas masks do that. Maybe N95s for fine particulates. But the reason for having everyone, or as who is it? Brett Giroir was on the TV the other day saying, if we get to 90% of the people wearing masks, is even putting your hand in front of your face, what that does is it just blocks whatever you might be diseased with from getting too far from your own body. And you don't have to be perfect in that regard. All you need to do is be able to block the transmission of a virus from someone who has it to others enough to get the spread rate down below 1. And then if you keep the rate down below 1 long enough, it'll eventually just disappear entirely. Which I think is why Trump often says, and people ridicule him for this, but he says, I think it's just going to go away. And that's actually what happened with the first SARS virus, which wasn't as contagious. So it was easier to get it to die off. But the more contagious something is, the more people have to be either on their guard, keeping their distance, or putting making sure that people who are diseased have a mask. A mask is not going to what?
I don't wear a mask. I wear a respirator.
Well, right. That might protect you
with a
if you're in a room full of people who have, or if there's enough like virus in a room that you go into, then if you breathe in that mask, if it's a respirator, can filter out the virus if it's sufficiently fine. Now I don't know if
it's a military CDR mask.
Well, that'll do it. That'll do it
for chemical, biological.
Yeah,
weapons.
right. Then you're covered. But most people wearing the cloth around, if there's a cloud of viral particles or just droplets, whatever you want to call it, something containing virus in your vicinity and you're breathing in, unless you're wearing, like you said, a military grade, you're not going to protect yourself from inhaling it. But what the whole point of the mask wearing is that, as a rule, whether you're sick or not, if as a rule, at least 90% or whatever the number is, whether it's 70%, 80, 90, 100, if it's just a habit that everyone gets into, then even the people who are careless about spreading things around, like they sneeze and they blast out when they cough, they don't cover themselves. If everyone simply has a covering, then even those sloppy people won't be able to easily transmit it to everyone else. And then, just over time, the virus itself won't have a place to live anymore, and it'll just die away. And I'll give you one example for how I think has been successful. Now, there are many other factors possibly, and they may all need to work together to make it work the way it has. But in Hong Kong today, only 10 people have died total out of 7.5 million people. And in New York, it's been over 18,000, New York City alone. Probably even more than that, because New York actually keeps two figures. They have a figure for what they call confirmed, which is over 18,000, and then they have another 4,000 plus for possible. So, I mean, that's an astonishing discrepancy, and you can't explain it away by saying, well, they might calculate things differently or count things differently. There's just no way. And in Hong Kong, people don't want to wear a mask because anyone tells them to. They're in rebellion against the communist government in Beijing. And they've actually been wearing masks all last year when there was no disease around, because they wanted to keep their identities private from the facial recognition software they have in all the cameras. So they kept wearing masks even when they were told not to, when they passed a special law banning masks. And then when the disease came around, they just kept wearing their masks, and almost no one's died. I mean, it's astonishing. And I'm surprised that no one ever talks about that in the United States. You know, the politics are one thing. There is no law in any state that I'm aware of that allows any governor or any local official to require you to wear a mask. And I've been beating that drum like crazy forever, and nobody seems to be listening. I mean, there are a few out there. I guess, who is it? Peggy, I forget her last name, has done some YouTube videos on it. But I've actually read the law in California. And in California, there's all sorts of laws or statutes or clauses of statutes on communicable diseases that address the issue of disease. And even though this coronavirus is not specified, others are, like tuberculosis. There's specific provisions for those. And none of those, even for tuberculosis, are as stringent as what they're imposing right now for this coronavirus. For coronavirus, that just falls under the general rubric of communicable and infectious diseases. And there are basically three kinds of actions that the government can take against people who are infected. You can isolate, or you can quarantine. And well, I said three. There's actually, those are the only two. The third case is for people who are non-infected. Schools can be closed. That's a special whole section. But that doesn't even make sense in this current situation, because all the evidence that I've seen shows that people who are in school, grade school anyways, are not susceptible to disease or transmitting it easily. So anyways, it's all a bunch of baloney. The political thing is unfortunately overshadowed just basic common sense, not common sense, but good sense in making sure that people take care of themselves and try to prevent the disease from spreading too much. In the absence of a vaccine or some other kind of cure.
Do you think now that they've implemented their mainland rules against free speech in Hong Kong, what do you think would happen if you placed an order to a Chinese company to make masks that said "Free Hong Kong"?
Hey, that's a really good question.
Would they?
Would
they
better would
print
be
it?
design one with a Winnie the Pooh meme on it.
You think they'd do business with you? I just wonder. It'd be kind of fun to do that as a YouTube show.
You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if you could get away with it, because you can probably get the print run up and processed before they even realize what it said.
Fred, Fred.
Oh, Fred.
Fred's
not here.
Who was talking?
Oh, that was me, Mark Shaw.
That's Mark.
Sorry.
Oh, I thought Fred was on there too.
Let me.
Okay, well, he must have
fair.
just signed off. But I wanted to share a video that Fred Seltoff did. I was going to do it while everybody's on, but I forgot towards the end. But I want to play it so it's recorded. He did a video about voting the incumbents out of office. So hopefully the audio will go through.
Officials propose, support, and create laws or policies
I can't hear what he's saying. Other people hear what he's saying?
No.
You need to be able to get your native audio to go over that.
Yeah, I
Instead of
can.
your
The audio's
microphone
not
audio.
going over?
No, you need to set it up so the native audio goes over and not the microphone audio. I think it's a setting in your Zoom.
Yeah, you're trying to have it come out of your speakers and into your microphone. That's why it's not working. It needs to be filtered, go straight through your
Yeah.
computer circuit.
I've had that same problem in two other forms of software for meetings. I need to figure out how to do it myself. I know it can be done because I've seen people do it, but unfortunately they haven't explained to me how to do it properly.
What's the name of the video? We can look it up separately too. Drip.
Is it a YouTube?
I thought I
By the
had
way,
that.
I wonder about this.
I thought I had that fixed.
The president's very upset with social media companies that censor his message. And I wonder, why is it that when I want to communicate with my government, they make me use Facebook and Twitter and private message services instead of something the government runs? You really want to hurt their business, just put out an executive order that says no government agency can use social media. That's probably a good third of their business.
Well, that would only apply then to the federal government, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. But the point is, it's like when in the Clinton administration, when they were suing Microsoft for supposed antitrust. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a second. We used to use WordPerfect and we switched to Microsoft Word in the middle of that lawsuit. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, Bill Gates is getting money, a license fee for every single government employee because they all got a computer on their desk. Every state employee, every county employee, every city employee. Government employees must make about probably a third of his business. If the federal government really was serious about charging him with antitrust, they should have taken their business away from him. But they didn't. They switched to his business and required everybody to do business with Microsoft Word. So I figure, Trump could do the same thing by executive order. How hard would it be to put out an executive order that says the U.S. Navy can't publish a Twitter feed and a Facebook page anymore for each one of its 1,000 commands around the world?
Wow.
Think about the amount of business that they would lose and how that would hurt them, because how many other people sign up for those things in order to get that information? There's no reason why I shouldn't be able to get that information right off a government server. If we're really talking about fixing things through market principles, there's an answer. I often thought that was the best way to take care of immigration problems. They say, oh, well, gosh, you're discriminating against Mexicans because you're just putting a wall on the border of Mexico. And you know that more than half the people who are here illegally come here as overstays on their visas. I go, okay, no problem. We don't need to go out and hire a bunch of people to go catch everybody. We just do the same thing that we do when you get a traffic ticket. You pay bail. Right? You post a bond when you come into the country with your visa, and when you don't show up to leave within 6 months, we just go out and hire. What do they have in every single county in the country?